What's up, everybody? I'm Uber from the Overwatch League, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel. That's right, the esports historian lives right here. And if you're seeing this message, you're probably already blocked on Twitter. Unlucky, really.
Pleb, I'm stylish. You get hyped off one scoop, talking smilish. Shiro, sugar, long plateau time, pleb, I'm stylish. If I mispronounced how nice it was, it would be delish-us. Gamersops, 10% off with the code Thorin, Thorin, at gamersops.gg. It's delicious, innit? Doesn't make you into a British pop star, believe it or not, or someone who raps referencing British pop stars. Now, the CSGO scoring system, the scoreboard and max rounds and all the rest of that jazz seems really simple, seems really straightforward, right? You get to 16. I will notice when tournaments say, you just have to get to 16. It's like, no, you have to get to 16 within regulation and all that context. But okay, right? In theory, it sounds simple enough to explain to someone, right? Also, you say to them, you know, the team that's leading is the one closer to winning and all that jazz. The problem is it isn't. It's actually a huge mistake to A, think of a CS match like that, and B, to present it like that to fans. You're actually going to mislead them completely, and it's not going to make any sense what happened in the game. They're not going to understand the story, the narrative of the game, the flow of the game, or what the teams are doing and adjusting to each other. Instead, in my opinion, what you need to do is understand CSGO, the way the score works in a pro match, is not a linear round-by-round climb towards the winning team, the leading team winning. And leading doesn't even imply, even though you're leading on the scoreboard, you're actually ahead in the game or the more likely team to win, as counterintuitive as that may seem. Now, this is a point I want colour commentators to understand and to emphasise and stress when they're on broadcasts. It's a point I make very often when I do broadcasts like watch parties, especially if I'm doing a serious one, like I'm doing the major final or something. I always try to update the fans in case someone's more casual as to like essentially who's ahead in this game, like who's the game tilting towards, who's got like extra resources and other factors that mean they can win. Can this team do a big comeback now? Is this map pretty much over if they win this next one? I'm always trying to put it in that kind of a context. Like you'll often hear me say things like, this is the game right here on this round, even though the scoreboard might be 12-12, but what map is it? What's the money situation? I'll be like, sometimes the team that's down on the scoreboard, don't worry, they're actually now even money or a favourite to reach overtime or to win in regulation, even though they're behind. Then sometimes someone's ahead on the scoreboard and I'll say, even though they're ahead on the scoreboard, they're actually in big trouble the rest of this game. They didn't get enough rounds on the first side. The other team's very good on the side that they've swapped over to now, and they struggle on the side. The team in question who's ahead struggles on the side they've swapped to. So actually, maybe they didn't get enough that round. Doesn't matter that they're ahead on the scoreboard. Plus, look, they just lost the pistol. The point is, the scoreboard lies. It doesn't always tell you who's ahead, who's winning, who's going to win. It doesn't tell you those things. First of all, the side bias. Remember, in Counter-Strike, each map isn't equal, and especially teams aren't equal. So, for example, one of the actual moments that made me think of this is I didn't think it was stressed enough, actually, during the IEM Katowice final, that when Heroic was playing on Mirage against G2, and they were up 8-1 on T side of Mirage, that is an incredible lead. Like, it's actually amazing that G2 came back to win that. That should have been really billed as like one of the all-time great comebacks in a final. Because 8-1 T side on Mirage, so you've already won the T half. By the way, it's not even necessarily default you win the T half. Actually, this is a map where you should have like a slight CT edge at the end of that. So if you're up 8, remember, that's not even the end of the half. It's not 8-7. You're up 8-1. Now there's a world where you could go to double digits. Then by the way, you get to double digits on T side of Mirage. You have almost won the map just on the T side with the way the map balance works and the way team trends work out. Meanwhile, yeah, if you'd been on Nuke and you were on CT side and you were Heroic, you had an 8-1 lead, yeah, that's nothing. That's not even that crazy a lead. Like, it's actually quite default that people get double-digit CT rounds rather, on Nuke, on the CT side. That is just a classic trend. So actually, 8-1, you still have more work to do even on the first half. Never mind being that close to winning the game. So, crucially, for a normal team, you have a lead like that on T side of Mirage, you are very, very likely going to close it out when you swap to CT half. It's just so likely. Then if you win the pistol, by the way, you're so close. If you win the pistol and don't get reset on the second round, when you're on CT side of Mirage and you had a massive lead, or 8 rounds at least on the T side, you are in a really strong position. You're in the driving seat of this game. So then when someone like G2 comes back and with their absurdly strong firepower and individual performances, wins that map, overcomes that, and not only that, doesn't even win it like desperately, like wins it in impressive fashion from there on. First of all, Heroic threw a big lead there and let a lot of their advantages go, and G2 climbed back into a game that scoreboard-wise might not seem as crazy, but actually is incredible what they were able to battle against there. Like I say with the Nuke example, if you had an 8-1 CT lead on the old Dust 2, that would be a very, very strong one as well. People are expected to win T-side on that map. You're actually in the driving seat right then, even if it ends 8-7 after being up 8-1 on CT side. We're talking about old Dust 2 here. If you're on Inferno, by the way, the joke there is an 8-1 lead on either half actually doesn't really mean anything yet. Could still end 8-7. Normally, it's sort of an 8-7, 9-6 map anyway. Again, it's a huge lead on the scoreboard, but doesn't necessarily mean that much, especially if you're the one who won the pistol and got a little round going on CT side and just had your economy strong. Doesn't actually mean that much all in all. By the way, if you're on CT side of Nuke with economy and you're down, say, 12-3, but you're on CT side and you have the money for guns and util, I actually think you're even money at that point to reach OT or to win outright. You might even be, if you're a strong CT team, a favourite even though you're down on the scoreboard. Because there's only at that point in time 5 rounds left in regulation and the other guy has to get 3 T rounds out of it. And if you've got buys every round, he probably has to win 3 gun rounds out of 5 on T side of Nuke. That's actually not that likely it'll happen. Even if he's been winning the game and doing awesome. Actually, I don't think he is in a massive favoured position, even though the scoreboard seems like, well, you still got to catch up to him, all that jazz. That's actually going to be a pretty tough call, getting those XX off, winning those full gun rounds when you're not going to get a break against the CT economy. Then there's the whole pistol round factor, right? So it's not just how you start the game. If you win the pistol round, that's going to set you up for a nice half. It's going to get your economy rolling, especially if you're CT side. But crucially, if you mess up on the next round and you have the SMGs and the FAMAS and he comes in with the AK and the Galil and the Force buy or a Super Soldier buy and the Ts reset you after that round, you're in a terrible CT position and now you're behind the 8 ball of the economy. Similarly, on T side, sometimes it doesn't matter if you lose the pistol because you could be the one who forces back like this, gets the crazy kill off, especially if you've got a simple as Ewu and Eco, Monacy, these sorts of players who break the game. You have chances and you have a flow to the game that the scoreboard doesn't acknowledge, actually, especially when the scoreboard, you're typically used to it from just any random match, a matchmaking game, a low-level pro game. We're talking about the top level of Counter-Strike here. There's more factors to consider in. I mean, I've often pointed out that the CT side economy, it's not about the idea, do you just have enough to buy for this round? It's that if you don't have enough to buy for the next round, even if you win, now the economy becomes about not only win the CT round, but keep 3 people alive, so you have a full buy and full economy. I made a whole video about that. That was the most just alarming thing to me about how broken the economy was, is that now the game didn't just become about win the round of CT, it became about win the round with a certain number of people and certain number of weapons. That's just, nobody can think that way. Nobody's able to, that's almost like NFL levels of coaching you need with someone in the air constantly in between every player reminding you. You can't do it if you're a pro player, especially not without a few timeouts you get in CSGO. So quite frankly, it doesn't matter if the score says you're leading, if you're constantly in a position where the second even you win a round but you lose 3 people in the round, that happens on many CT rounds where you win the round, you're going to be in a disadvantageous position, or you're not going to have your full buy, or you're not going to have full utility, or one person's going to be lacking a gun or on a FAMAS or gun with no armor, whatever it is, it's going to start to erode it and wear away at you, quite frankly. And it's the more important side on CT side in terms of the map, right? What if you're on a map where it's all about winning CT rounds, Overpass, Vertigo? It's massive to win CT rounds on these maps. But what if you were the one who constantly, early on in the game, gets reset, you're behind on the economy? It doesn't matter that you're winning rounds. You're winning rounds the hardest way possible. If you had your full bank behind you and you'd never been reset once, you'd be winning rounds, but you'd have rounds to spare. And you could lose rounds and be right back in the game. And you could play the war of attrition with the opponent for a little while. Now, if you think that's bad in modern day CS, I need to explain it. It was even more extreme in the old economy before, 3-4 years ago when the economy got changed. Maybe it was 2 or 3 now, actually. The old reset economy was even more brutal, where you went all the way back down in bonus when you lost a round. That meant there was a famous saying we often had as analysts, which is most maps of Counter-Strike are actually decided by 4 or 5 gun rounds, where both teams have guns and economy. That's basically what would decide these games because of how the reset economy worked and the fact that you tended to have only exceptionally skilled teams could routinely make a force buy with pistols work, like the old Envious and like a Na'Vi with Simple, or the old Fnatic in 2015 with the CZ. Yeah, or the Tech 9. These people could get it done. Lesser mortals, no, you're just in a really tough spot because of the way the economy and the scoreboard actually works against you sometimes in that regard, even though it looks like you're doing awesome. Actually, you're in for a tough time, and now your opponent's just putting rounds on the scoreboard easily. Your rounds are so hard, they're an uphill climb. He's just getting right back in the game. That's why I'll give you a good example of this, where it can change totally if you understand these factors, the way you look at a game, which is at the first ever CSGO major, the big match everyone wanted to see was Very Games from France against NIP from Sweden. The top two teams in the world. Very Games was actually number one. They just over the last few months overtaken NIP, who'd been number one the whole time in CSGO. And not only did their core used to lose to NIP, but now with Shocks and Scream they didn't. But more importantly, they'd also beaten NIP straight up and won the titles over the last few months. And NIP hadn't won for a few months at this point in time. So when they met in the semi-final of the first ever major, the map for the third map, the decider, was Nuke. And this had been a really interesting match because Very Games lost very narrowly on Dust 2, super close. Then they smashed NIP on Inferno. Coming into Nuke, both teams are really good Nuke teams. This is a classic map potentially. And then you look at the result, right? It was a way more exciting map because of the potential than the scoreboard suggests. It was a 16-5 on the third map, and that just looks like, oh, well, easy, just closed them out, never any doubt there. But here's what happened. NIP won the CT half 11-4, but even then it was 11-2, and then there was a 2-round comeback 5 Very Games to end the half. Now, that means at the end of that half, 11-4 isn't even an ironclad lead on Nuke. It's a good lead, but something like 12 or 13 rounds is an ironclad like lock that you're going to win the game. 11 is right on the border, and especially NIP was maybe the best Nuke team, but Very Games is one of the best Nuke teams in the whole world. So actually, especially if Very Games had won the CT pistol, there are all sorts of chances for them to get on a roll and come back into the game. Now, NIP won the pistol and even got to 14-4, a monster lead, but then Very Games almost won a save round just before that, didn't quite. They came to the 14-4, Very Games won the round. It was now 5-14, terrible, right? Scoreboard says no way you're going to win. But it's CT Nuke. There's a world where they buy their guns, they have people like Shocks and Screams and very strong players. They start fragging. They're a good Nuke team. They get a 3 or 4 rounds going. They break the economy of NIP and they would have been right back in that game. All of a sudden, remember, 3 or 4 rounds. Now you're going to be at like 8, 9 rounds on CT side. They're stuck on 14. They haven't got many kills. Do they get the bombs down even? This is what the old Nuke is a map. You can stop even getting the bomb down potentially because see how you can just turtle up on the map. There was a world where there was a very exciting comeback that could have happened there. It just didn't because after Very Games won that round, they immediately lost the next one. NIP got back in the game. They won a 1v1 in the last round and they won the whole map and went to the final. Obviously didn't end up winning the map final, but you see how what actually on the scoreboard, it's never a close game, it's never even an interesting game. It's a much more potentially interesting game with a lot more nuance of what's going on behind. And the teams know these key inflection points in the series and they're looking towards that and then they're planning their buy patterns towards that and then they're thinking, how many do I have left? And if you're the T-side caller, you're thinking like American football, if you don't have much time, I'm going to have to do a bunch of quick plays out of the 2-minute drill. If I've got loads of time and I only need one score, I could do a lot of small runs and I could do a lot of moving the chains. The same concept exists in Counter-Strike. So I've often said I thought actually charges only would be a great format to have been for pro Counter-Strike. Then let's be real. You've got to add in intangibles, right? Even things that aren't observable on the screen. Like, for example, is your team better on CT or T? Because that's going to be a big deal, right? As to which side you need an amount of rounds on. Does your team have a key synergy at bomb spot on a key map? Like, for example, in the old Astralis that were almost unbeatable on Inferno, well, one of the reasons why is if you went to the A bomb site, Magisk and Dupree, they even still doing a bit in Vitality, were just unbelievable, their synergy on that A bomb site, especially if you have Magisk in the pit and Dupree's around the bomb site, the way they would play off each other, the way they would come, the way they would take turns to peek and do crossfires. This was so hard to get into that bomb site, even with like the best exec and the best players. Here's a question. Do you have a world-class player in a key position? Might be Electronic outside on Nuke at the beginning of last year. Or what about one of the best AWPers if you're on a really strong AWP map, like an Overpass, like a Mirage? How many times has someone like Zemu won Vitality Mirage, whether they were actually a good Mirage team or not? How many times back in the day did Fallen tip a game for SK or Luminosity on Overpass when maybe they were playing a team that was supposed to be better than them or as good as them on Overpass, like a FaZe or a Virtus Pro or a Team Liquid or a Na'Vi or whoever it might be? Then let's be real, there's also the psychological intangibles, right? The mental burden of what the scoreboard says and what your expectations are based on the half. Like, for example, you might actually have had what in theory is like a strong half, but now you're down after the strong half, and now suddenly like the economy's against you, and the way the map goes says actually you're running out of rounds, and suddenly you're going to need to win a lot in a row. Yeah, the scoreboard says you're ahead or the game's close, but for you, you might feel like you're drowning, you might feel like you're in quicksand. Maybe you need to pull off a streak of wins, like that very game's example. To me, I'm saying it's possible, and the map actually tilts a little bit towards you being able to do it. The problem is mentally to keep the focus of round after round after round after round, to know you can't make a mistake. That's tough. How about the idea that you get all the way back into a game, you get to overtime, but because you couldn't win in regulation, they were on 15, so it was 15-8 and then 15-9, and you even get to 15-15, how many times does a team then, after that amazing comeback, after all the rousing energy, after the fighting spirit, like, yeah, we're back in it, they get to OT, and then suddenly they're just flat. They've just burned off. It's almost like they've had the adrenaline dump from MMA. They're just done. And suddenly, it's like the burden was lifted, and then suddenly the game becomes normal again. They just lose in OT. Happens classic, right? I'd say another one, the opposite side of that, is when you're the team on 14 or 15 rounds really early in the second half, and suddenly the game gets back to a 14-14, a 14-15. Suddenly you're the one who feels totally back. It doesn't matter on the scoreboard. You're safe. Like, you're in a good position. Like, you can still win these last rounds and win the game, but you're going to feel like there's a weight upon you, and like the inertia of all those lost rounds is chipping away at you and is buoying up your opponent. So when you're talking about the game and you reference the scoreboard, and obviously you should do that as broadcast talent, don't just say the score or suggest that the leading team is the most likely to win, or they're going to win, or they're close to winning. Explain the context. Track the economy for fans. Tell them where they're at in that sense. Remind them what the side bias is for the map. Remind them what the utility requirements are for a specific team and how they play on a CT or a T side. Remind them that this team or this player has certain strengths or weaknesses that will affect how many rounds they're likely to get, what our expectations should be. Remind the fan of what the psychological burden might be in these circumstances. Essentially, do your job as an analyst and fill out the rest so that they're not just looking at a number going, number goes up, that's good. And they understand actually what is the flow of the game, what is the narrative of this particular match, and what's really going on above just numbers go up and down. The Beatles said they get by with a little help from their friends, but I get by with a little help from my Patreon community. And this video was kindly supported by Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Bot Pounder 420, Thooorin, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Tosh, and a special thanks always goes out to my main man Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers to find out who are the upcoming guests? Maybe you want to take part in one of those lengthy but intense esports discussions I have with my donators, or maybe you want to suggest a guest or a topic that I could cover. Well, if any of those tickle your fancy, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where in the description box below there is a Patreon link.